it's, again, I came back just in shock, and this is about people and families and their lives just disrupted beyond anything we could imagine. The human toll is one of the greatest I've seen in anything, and again, having been on the panel longer than anyone around the country, in floods in the Dakotas, in Iowa, Missouri, up and down the Mississippi, in Louisiana, and many incidents in Florida. Never seen anything quite like this. We do need the flexibility with the federal programs to be able to address this type of disaster and others yet to come. We've got to learn from, we learned some from the mistakes of Katrina, but it doesn't appear that we've come that far. And I have some questions, and I'll lead off with those at this point. First, Mr. Robinson, representing FEMA, we had last week 143,000 claims. Is that correct? Is that up or down? Or
as of yesterday, 140,000 claims.
140,000. And how many of those have received any funds? At one time, they told me about 40,000 when I was there last week.
I'd have to get back for the record. There's
I think that's very important.
Over 590 million in assistance. I have the dollars that have been provided. I do not have the number.
Well, they told me about 40,000, which is about a third of them had received something, and then I need to know the average amount of money, which you could divide by the amount of money given. Can't some of the staff behind him give him that information? Now, I think that's very important to come to the committee.
Yeah, as of this morning, the average was about $8,000.
But I'd like to know how many, and maybe you can reverse that and give us the math on that. Most disturbing to me is, and again, we went through this fiasco with the trailers that had formaldehyde, but we knew we had to have shelter for people. We still have 250,000 people displaced. And again, the wrong questions are asked. They're living with family. Some of them are driving all the way from the New Orleans area for shelter. It's a situation that is not acceptable. And when I asked to see what shelter FEMA had provided, this is more than 2 weeks out. Again, we had the one, you guys put up the one unit. Now, I was told there were 17 up, and the press accounts told me last weekend there were only 5 of these units actually up, and the others were on their way. Do you know how many modular units are up?
As of last night, we had 110 on site.
No, that's not the question I asked. How many are actually there and occupied, functioning for people?
I'd have to get back with you on that number.
No, that's not acceptable either. This is the one unit 2 weeks later. And again, the most essential thing is housing. And we had one unit, and they was told $60,000 for this one unit or more. That's a bigger unit, and that was the only one actually deployed and livable, somebody in it. We had 73 on the lot that I visited. They're lined up there. They told me they had 250 approved for placement, but they were not deployed. I asked the question, was there a contract in place to deploy and erect these? They said yes. So something's dramatically wrong. We'll be a month out on Sunday, and we have these units sitting there, only a handful deployed, and 250,000 people displaced. The other thing is these units are useless for 95% of the locations. They don't fit in people's driveway. The only place they could be deployed is to a rural area, and we had those incidents. We have 1,000, I'm told, on the way. But what are these people going to do in the meantime? This is not an acceptable solution. I talked to Administrator Fugate, it's not acceptable. Now, I know they can rent campers or portable units. Has any attempt been made to get that kind of equipment so that they could put them on site, stay there, and repair their homes?
Chairman Mica, there are several things we're trying to do. First and foremost, as the governor mentioned working with his program to do shelter at home.
Shelter in place, and I have questions about that. My question is, do we have other types of housing that can be located at the site where they can, to do the shelter in place, they've got to have a place to stay and live even while they're doing the repairs?
Under the rental assistance program, an individual can
Rent is available, but again, has there been an effort made to get some types of units made available, either a call to the industry to help or anything? I asked Fugate about this, because again, they can get these houses back according to the program to shelter in place, but they've got to have a temporary place to stay.
Under the rental assistance program, a survivor can rent a travel trailer.
But that's not my question. Do you has there been an outreach? Is there a program? Is something online that tells them that this is an eligibility?
Our program, since it's for up to 18 months, we look at HUD-approved units, so they would put people in safe and secure units.
That doesn't answer my question. The other thing, too, I heard, Governor, when I was there, is it took a long time to get the shelter in place. I think it was the incident was the 11th, the 24th. Was that the date that you finalized the shelter in place program? I think you testified to that.
I don't know if that's it. Sorry.
Well, again, I'm told it was the 24th. It was just before I got there, because I'm saying, why hasn't anything been done? They said that, well, the state has not approved a plan, and I guess I got there on Sunday. On Thursday, you had approved the plan, the shelter in place. I see.
Yes, but I would not characterize it. Nothing had been done before that.
Again, when I go to FEMA, they say, well, we have to wait on the state to have their plan. That plan was not. There was some delay. Usually when you have a disaster, within a week you get the assessment and a plan. This was a couple weeks in drafting. So I'm just telling you what I heard about excuses for them not deploying this faster.
Well, as you know, the Shelter at Home program is a state plan, but it is underwritten for the most part
by the federal
FEMA.
government.
And so
they have to have your plan before they. I'm telling you the excuses they gave me. My job isn't to hammer you, it's to hammer the feds, but I go to the feds and they tell me the state hadn't responded in a timely fashion. I'm just telling you what they told me.
And I'd like to comment on that, Mr. Chairman. We developed that program jointly, and in fact, it was with Administrator Fugate's first visit that we first discussed doing something like Shelter at Home.
But again, it didn't trigger the federal action for almost 2 weeks, is what they're telling me. So we need to look at some way to narrow that time frame in the future. Then one of the other things is I heard Mayor Sheldon and Landry, they both told me, Mr. Robinson, 21 days to have a contact with the officials whose communities are practically wiped out. And then when you get someone there, they have a contact that can't make a decision. It's got to be essential that we get with the community leaders in these programs in a disaster and identify a contact immediately. That did not happen, did it?
Sir, we put people in the Parish Office of Emergency Preparedness office.
Mayor Landry, didn't you tell me, how long was it before you got a contact? You held that slip of paper up in your office and showed me the name of the individual, and you just gotten that.
Yes, sir. It was in excess of 2 weeks, and it was a contact that was supposed to be assigned to me. One conversation on a Sunday afternoon, and have yet to hear back from that person since. Yet
to hear back from him. Mayor Sheldon, how long did it take you?
21 days. And let me state this. Being in contact with the parish officials does not drill it down into the local municipalities.
Right. Again, and you described the destruction in your community. Then Mayor Landry and Mayor Sheldon told me we had no disaster recovery center.
The
You had
DRC
no disaster recovery center 2 weeks afterwards. Did you finally get one?
We did.
You did. But he had none. And then I went back to the field where we had these units, portable units, sitting in the fields. This picture doesn't show it. There were multiple of these portable ones. And I went back and said, we need a portable unit in Denham Springs. That's not acceptable, and they're sitting in fields, not deployed.
Sir, there was about a 2-week discussion on whether or not we could have a DRC because we're in a flood zone.
Yeah.
the
Again,
folks-
and we've got a portable unit that was not, portable unit sitting, again, next to the trailers, or the modular units, saw them. Water. Okay, housing, then water. In Florida and other disaster areas, we were pre-staging water, one of the essentials to get to people, house, shelter, and water. I was told it was 4 or 5 days before FEMA water arrived. Is that right, Mayor Ramsey?
Yes, sir.
Is that right, Mayor Lamb?
Yes, sir, 5
Is that right, Mayor Sheldon?
I can't give you the date. I will tell
Okay.
you, had it not been for Congressman Graves, we would not have
Yeah,
had water.
people and the Cajun Navy and the Cajun people were delivering and helping people get water, I was told, for days before FEMA's water, which is supposed to be pre-staged, ever got there. And I said, well, what was the problem? And they said, communications. Mr. Robinson, why couldn't we get the water to them that FEMA has pre-staged?
So as I stated, we staged water and meals ready to eat in Camp Beauregard, which in accordance with the state plan we worked out, the National Guard then distributes that water down to the local
What
level.
happened in not being able to get it to these communities? They told me it was a communications problem. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not, and I'll check
We
that out.
need to find out what went wrong. Yes,
I'd like to point out that at no time did anyone from FEMA contact me and say that water was even available. I had to go through Congressman Graves' office to get it.
Again, these are the basics. Housing and water are not there. We've got shelter, which we're paying $60,000 a unit or more, and $20,000 to erect them, and they don't fit at 95% of the sites, and we have a handful of them deployed. This is a pitiful federal response by any measure. We've got the federal regs, the little circle of going around about raising the houses now. Something's got to be resolved with that. I don't know if a waiver can be done. I talked to the ranking member. We'll talk to Mr. Richmond and others. But people are left in limbo because they don't know if they can rebuild their homes. People are walking away from their homes. I met at dinner with a young man who and his wife had just bought 2 years ago. That young people mortgaged the house up to the hilt because they're trying to get their own home. He doesn't know whether to walk, to turn the keys over to the mortgage company. He was not in a floodplain, has no insurance. It is a pitiful situation, and they relied on federal floodplain maps, and now the economic impact in this region is going to be devastating. That not only have they lost their homes, they're going to turn the keys in. The financing of houses, probably the depreciation, 25–30% of every home there because of what's happened. So homes will be they've been not only underwater, now they're going to be underwater and people walking away and the jobs. The recovery, like in Denham Springs, they'll lose 50% of those businesses will never come back. It's almost impossible. They lost their stock, they lost their location, and then there are no customers because people don't have jobs. Well, you can tell this is frustrating. We do have Mr. Graves and I think Mr. Cedric, Mr. Richmond, we have a CODEL going down to look at that. Governor Edwards, Administrator Fugate told me he could handle this within his existing budget. Now, I don't know about the CDBG grants, but that's what he had told me. So I don't know about whether we'll need that. There's lots of money available, I'm told. We'll have to sort that out. I'm not certain. And the CDBG grants is probably the fastest way to get some action because it comes to the local communities and they can eliminate the red tape and go for it.
And I would like to respond to that. The administrator told me the same thing with the budget authority that he had pursuant to the previous appropriation for the agency. He can absorb the costs that are FEMA's costs, even at the 90% share. But CDBG, that is not contemplated as being coming out of that.
Right, that's a different, there are
sir.
different
Yes,
funds here. We've got some SBA issues. We've got, and I'm concerned about too, so I've gotten reports of possible fraud in some of the claims for food stamps and assistance, how that's being monitored, and cooperation even between state agencies is not what it should be, but we rely on the state for accessibility to some of those public assistance programs. That's got to be addressed, and we'll have some more questions on that. Let me yield now to